Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And it's particularly a pleasure that you chose this day and not this day last week, because this day last week at exactly this time, all the terraces and bars in Paris that had been closed opened up. So it might have been a bit complicated to accept the invitation. But as Jasmine mentioned, I'm an analyst at the OECD. I work in the Directorate for Public Governance. Specifically, I work in the team for public management and budgeting. The team was set up because, as one of our clients put it, budgeting and human resources are the two legs on which a ministry walks. So that's the focus for a lot of our work. And I work specifically on the human resources side. So I work with a range of OECD countries and non-OECD countries on the human resource issues that they're facing, everything from leadership profiles to skills to training to recruitment systems. Jasmine's given us 10 minutes just to introduce who we are and what we're about. So I just want to give you a snapshot of some of the work that we're carrying out related to the future of work. I'm really excited to hear from you as practitioners, as HR practitioners. I mean, we exist to kind of learn from you and to see what's happening. So I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. I guess just to introduce the public employment and management team briefly, there's three broad pillars to what we do, and this all has an impact on how we think about the future of work. We've got the kind of the research piece of what we do. We publish a range of working papers and publications, and future of work has been our kind of guiding star for the last year, 2 years. But we're not just sitting in Paris collecting data and analyzing that behind a screen. We work with a whole range of OECD countries, including Canada and non-OECD countries, which again brings us slightly different perspectives. And then, if those of you who read The Economist in the past used to call us a rich person's club and a think tank. Now they call us a mostly rich person's club. But the message of our Secretary General is very much that we're not just a think tank, we're not just coming out with these thought pieces. We really work hand in hand with countries. So a lot of our work at the moment has been on developing a toolkit that countries can access various data points, case studies, country examples, because those are really the things that we're asked for most when we speak with member countries. Do you have data on such and such a practice? Where can I learn more about what Canada is doing, for example? So, Jasmine, I think you mentioned there'd be a possibility to circulate some of these documents afterwards, so I'm very happy to put those in a neat little package and send those on. But when I think about the future of work, one of the ways that we've tried to conceptualize it when we work with our countries is by a framework that we've called the 3 Fs. We think that public services of the future should have 3 aspects in common, that they should be forward-looking, they should be fulfilling, and that they should be flexible. Now, unfortunately, these 3 Fs don't really translate directly into French, but just to give you a sense of what we mean by these 3 pillars, when we talk about forward-looking, we're talking about administrations that are looking at this type of skills that are needed for the future. One of the examples that I point to frequently is the UK civil service, which has done quite a lot of thinking about digital skills, and in particular about what those look like. For new emerging digital professions like user experience designers and so on, they've comprehensively mapped what that would mean and how that would look like in a job requirement, how it might look like at entry level, how it might look at senior level, and what are the career development possibilities within that particular field. So that's a really interesting way of looking at the future, but in a quite concrete way. Flexible, I mean, over the last 12 months, we've really experienced this flexibility of the public service. We've been working from home, worked 9 to 5 working hours kind of went out the window. We've been delivering all throughout that time. So it's something that gets a lot of heads nodding, and we speak about this quite intuitively. The public service now suddenly is flexible. But one of the ways we try and use this framework is to think about the trade-offs. And one of our delegates said, look, this flexibility is lovely, but will my public accept public servants working from cafes near the beach? Now, it's an extreme example, but it just gives you an idea of some of the trade-offs involved in developing this idea of flexibility. And on the fulfilling side, of course, I mean, when we think about HR innovation in the public sector, it's important to think about actually how we do the work in the public sector. So a lot of our work involves working with countries to try and see how they're actually developing new management structures, new ways of working, so that the work itself is engaging and fulfilling. That's the future of work. That's how we've kind of been thinking about it. We have a working paper that's in the works that should be coming out fairly soon. Check our website for more details. But I guess the next point I wanted to raise is that even before the future of work and even before COVID, the idea of leadership in the public sector had been a really core area for us. Recognizing that public sectors, really hard to change how things are done, and that leaders have an outsized impact on setting a vision, setting a standard, and guiding and managing budgets. So well, who are these leaders, and how are public sectors looking for them? How are they supporting them? Our data collection has shown that in a lot of OECD countries, senior civil servants are managed separately and differently and under different conditions to other public servants. They have access to specific training, and some administrations have ways of detecting high potential and future leaders early on in their career and supporting them with learning opportunities, not PowerPoint presentation after PowerPoint presentation, but really immersive experiences working across different parts of the public sector. So what we've been trying to do is really understand these processes. And when it comes to leadership, I can't believe I'm 5 minutes into my presentation and I haven't told you about our recommendation on public service leadership and capability. This is an OECD instrument that we developed in kind of 2018 that was adopted by the OECD Council in 2019. And it's 14 principles that we've worked with our member countries on that set out what we consider to be a fit for purpose public service, one fit for the future. And that's really been the guiding, one of the guiding stars of our work with our member countries. We look at the leaders, what are the values that they're expected to embody, how are the frameworks for managing and developing them. We look at the type of skills for the future. Are public services able to, in the first place, identify what type of skills they need? And second, are their processes and systems able to recruit and develop those? And finally, we look at the institutional aspect in this recommendation. We look at responsibility for human resource management. Of course, it's not confined to the human resource department and the human resource department only. We try and look at the coordination across line managers, across ministries for responsibility for human resource management, encompassing talent management, performance management, learning and development. Now, so far, it's been pretty high level, future work, leadership, international OECD instrument, but a huge amount of our work involves traveling to, well, now virtually, but traveling to countries and working with public servants and trying to look at the individual side and the group side of their work. And thinking about the future work, one of the comments that came back to us from the Public Governance Committee, which we held about 2 years ago at the OECD, with a former head civil servant of the Irish Civil Service, and he said, look, when we think about the future work and when we think about leadership profiles, we expect someone on a spectrum between Obama and Gandhi. He said, what are our expectations for this leadership group? So we've tried to do a little bit of thinking around not just setting the high-level framework, the macro framework for where we think the public service is going, but to try and look at the way in which public servants actually work. First of all, they're individuals, but of course individuals like yourselves, like myself, we work within organizations with specific procedures and ways of doing things. We don't often have this scope ourselves to be able to innovate and develop as we like. So a lot of our work, and we worked with the OECD Observatory of Public Sector Innovation, which many of you may have come across, is to really try and tease out what are these factors that accelerate and drive innovation to try and bring about some of the aspects that we've been working on. Jasmine, in one of your earlier emails, you asked us to talk about what are our ambitions and hurdles. So I've thrown quite a lot of information at you. But the stage that we're at now at the OECD, we're in a privileged position to be able to look across 38 member countries now, because Costa Rica officially joined today or yesterday. What we're trying to do is to look at the resilience. How can public services, given what's happened over the last year in terms of COVID, how can they build better resilience for the future? What are the types of skills that public services as a whole, so not me or you as individuals, but as a whole can try and develop? And some of the skills that we've been thinking about is this idea of motivation. When you're motivated and engaged, you're likely to go the extra mile to innovate, to develop new public services. How can we attract people that not just know legislation, that have passed their concours to get into the public service, but that are able to problem solve creatively? I mean, that's a really key issue. And are our recruitment systems able to identify and assess these people accurately and fairly? And learning, how many webinars have we attended in the last 12 months? Learning is really one of the key skills. Gone are the days when you could you do your university degree, get in the door and narrowly apply that knowledge. The journey is only beginning when we arrive in the public sector, yet frequently in the public sector, when we think of learning, again, it's the classroom presentation, it's the PowerPoint slides, but the learning and development professionals, of course, will tell you that there's so much more to learning than just that very narrow way of doing it. And then, of course, there's the collaborative aspect, and I'll finish on that. If we're looking to develop these forward-looking public services fit for the future of work and to be able to carry out a human resource innovation, it's that idea of collaborating across silos that's really interesting. And one of my colleagues at the OECD Observatory of Public Sector Innovation, he wrote a blog post reflecting on kind of 5 years of what he had seen in his work, trying to work with countries on innovation. And he said, look, the crux of the matter is that you have individuals who are trying to go beyond their day-to-day job task in a system that actually does not encourage that type of innovation. We think of Mark Zuckerberg's famous motto, move fast and break things. Well, you're in the public sector, you probably can't move fast and you definitely can't break things. So in that context, where are the areas for intervention where human resource professionals like yourselves can target their intervention, because you can't do everything. So where can you address those most needed issues? I know I've thrown a lot at you, so I'll stop there, but I'm really looking forward to the question and answer session. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Donna. Yes, you definitely threw a lot. I wish I could slow it down. I'm glad it's recorded because we can watch it over and over again, but I wish I could slow it down to break it down into small, digestible chunks, because I feel like almost everything you said was an avenue that we could explore, especially specifically like the fit for purpose for the future and the role that individuals versus groups have to play. That's a really important distinction. So thank you. Thank you for attending. Yes, I'm also glad the terraces did not open today and they did last week. All right, thank you. So next, Madame Marie-Ève Goron, Assistant Director, a little closer to home, Human Resources Branch, Canada Revenue Agency. Ma'am.
Thank you very much. Bonjour à tous. Un petit peu comme la présentation plus tôt, je vais parler principalement en anglais. J'ai traduit quelques paragraphes 5 minutes avant la présentation en français, mais si jamais vous avez des questions en français, n'hésitez pas à poser la question ou faire le commentaire dans la langue de votre choix. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Marie-Ève Goron, and I work in HR at the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency. The portfolio that are under my my files are basically the corporate workforce planning and the future of work. So those go really well together because planning and being prepared for the future really means laying out the groundwork today to be able to get to the future a little more prepared. And we do that by doing a yearly plan, which we call the Agency Workforce Plan. The Agency Workforce Plan concentrates on anything from 1 to 3 years, usually planning, but our future of work is more targeted towards 10, 15 to 25 years. To support that portfolio, I sit on a variety of working groups. One is the Workplace Integrators Group, we call it the WIG, the Digital Transformation Committee, where I focus on people component of digitization, and the subcommittee on learning. So we circle back to learning. I think it's really important when we talk about future of work. Everyone involved in those committees, we're trying a lot to be as horizontal as possible, but we have definitely one goal in mind, and it's planning today to be better prepared for tomorrow or for the future. We definitely also keep in mind that one of the important component to the future of work is the people. So in the future of work and the integration of digital technology, it does not substitute for humanity in our organizations. Rather, it should complement each other. COVID-19 and the response of the organization all around the world have shown how important that humanity and that empathy is. And it also brought much needed attention to the future of work. So we're happy that we're in the spotlight a little bit. In terms of defining the work, as well as how, where, or by whom the work will get done, is definitely been altered by the pandemic. Changes that would before take years to actually happen have been implemented in just days or weeks since the pandemic. So it definitely accelerated things. At the agency, our team started looking at the concept for future of work about 5 years ago. So I'm going to say around 2017. We have come a long way since that beginning, and there's a lot of awareness that people got on the subject since that day. There are all over the agency pockets of work that are actually being done, and where future of work is actually looked at. Sorry, I'm hearing myself an echo. From different lens and different focuses. We're definitely going in the right direction. In terms of our work, so I'm going to share a few highlights of our journey so far, and a little bit of the concrete things that we've done to date. On an ongoing basis, we conduct environmental scanning and research on a variety of topics. We read a lot of articles. We try to stay on top of reports that are coming out from various sources. Given the accelerated pace of change, both the technology and otherwise, staying on top of those developments is absolutely key. In about, I think it was 2018, we facilitate discussion all across the country on future of work with our senior management table from our 13 branches and 5 regions, and various employee network as well. And basically what we wanted to know is take the pulse on where the agency was with regards to future of work. Are people thinking about it? Are people doing something about it? So we wanted to get a benchmark as to where we started. That same year, we held a strategic foresight session facilitated by the Conference Board of Canada with representatives all across the agency to consider possible futures. And in doing so, shifting paradigms and inspire. During that session, we created a long-term people vision, and the long-term people vision now reads, because it was tweaked a little bit since 2018, it reads a thriving, diverse, and inclusive workforce, combining strength and contributing to a transforming Canada. So that's CRA's long-term people vision. We created a working group at the time that was involving all of the internal services, such as IT, real property, security, communication, and human resources, to work on horizontal files, as well as collaborate and align ourselves on the topics such as communications and workplace. That group is now the WIG that I talked about earlier, and that group actually meets weekly. That's how much we have to talk about at that high level. And most of the people on that WIG committee are DG level, so it's definitely important for the agency. Since 2018, we've done quite a bit of actions, things we have developed and began implementing an HR data strategy. We introduced character leadership as a way to ensure that we have the right people to actually lead us into the future. And we initiated and redesigned our staffing program. It's still ongoing, so lots of change. We're experimenting right now. I mean, the pandemic put some ideas on hold and accelerated others, as you can imagine. Recently, we focused on the development of a future of work framework. So it began in 2019, and the main document was approved by senior management in 2020, right before the pandemic. So right now, this year, we concentrated on experimenting with the framework to make sure that theory meets practice, and to make sure that it is, that we can operationalize it to the whole agency. In terms of next step, we're hoping that by next year, we'll be able to socialize it or share it with the whole agency. The goal of the framework is to equip the organization with a practical guide to proactively plan and support the agency future readiness in line with service transformation. To anyone that is involved with that planning, like our goal for the framework is that anyone that is involved in planning regardless of who they are in the organization, should have a component of future planning, because it is very common for us to plan for things that are immediate, that we can see right away. We tend to fires and making sure that things are running smoothly, but it should have a component, a little bit future planning in that role. And the last goal for the framework is to make sure that the tools that we create resonate with people. So we want to make sure that we explore the topic, and while managing the work and the workplace, we need to make sure that we think about what it could look like 5, 10, 15 years from now. We have definitely been, the human resources branch has been definitely in a leadership role into driving the discussion on future of work. I don't see that ending anytime soon. In the last year, the agency has sent out for COVID-19 employee survey that we gathered information on people's level of stress, well-being, their opinion on on working remotely, and so much more. So the results of those surveys will definitely help the organization make informed decisions in the years to come. And well, one of the topics that come to mind when I think about that is what the workplace of the future would look like. In terms of challenges and obstacles, I mean, yeah, I will put the long-term people vision in the chat as soon as I'm done. Thank you for your question. Recently, one of the biggest obstacles is the volume and the speed of the change. I think that it's not just for the agency. I think it's pretty much all around. And on top of that, you add new workloads to the existing work. People in general are tired, and some of them, if not the majority of them, might be overwhelmed from time to time. Donc, c'est pas juste à propos du travail, c'est aussi les ajustements qui arrivent dans la vie de tous les jours. Donc, dans les 15 derniers mois, il y a eu des changements de règles, que ce soit au niveau de la santé, les restaurants sont ouverts, sont pas ouverts, on peut aller à l'épicerie une fois par semaine. Donc, vraiment, beaucoup de changements qui s'est passé au niveau du style de vie aussi. Donc, tout ça a causé quand même beaucoup de fatigue depuis la dernière année. Donc, c'est définitivement quelque chose qu'on garde en tête au niveau des obstacles. In terms of the challenges specific to the future of work itself, I think that one of the biggest one that we've had is the different level of understanding and awareness on future of work. Some people think that 2 years from now is being super futuristic, which is not necessarily the goal for our framework. So we need to change a little bit how people think. There's an overload of information, especially since there's overload of information, especially that future of work has gained momentum with the pandemic, and the multiple sources don't necessarily paint the whole picture. So you have to be critical of what you read about future of work in the literature, for example. Still new, still different ways of thinking for a lot of people, and there's also a lot of resistance as well. La bonne nouvelle, c'est qu'on peut utiliser l'avenir du travail comme façon de gérer les changements au quotidien. Donc, ça nous aide un peu. In terms of goal, the objective of the framework is to be more concrete and to give the agency something more concrete and easy to use. It goes beyond the framework, and anyone involved in planning should be thinking about what their work or the people that will work, what are those characteristics in the future. And as they do, I'm hoping that they will seek out the documents that we have, either the framework or the tools that we are continuously developing. And really, the goal is to have a guide to develop future-ready roadmaps, if the clients are interested, to outline concrete activity that will be required for the agency to meet its evolving business, the client's expectations, and also the transformation requirements that are needed in the future. In terms of my final thought, I think I'm going to close out with that. I think that my final thought, if you are interested in learning more about future of work, be critical of what you see, make up your own mind, ask questions, seek out those that are passionate about the subject, because those people will actually will likely be inclined to actually share the information with you. And if you're lucky, you're going to get their personal experiences as well. And I think that can be very rich. Be curious about what's out there in the literature, in other government department, in the private sector, and look for different points of view than your own, because that will make you well-rounded in, you know, how to see or how to prepare for the future. And lastly, look for opportunities to collaborate with people inside and outside your organization. It might not be on future of work per se, it could be on innovation, it could be on something else. But I think that going outside and getting a different perspective could make you rethink what you know, question the status quo, and yeah, it's a fascinating topic. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to hearing the conversation and some of the questions that you may have.
Love your passion, Madame Goron, and lots of splendid advice as well. So thank you for opening up that door to that discussion. Yeah, people are curious. People want to know more. People are curious about what is being done out there, and these platforms like this are opportunities to share and build those connections as well. Maintenant, Madame Holly Palin, Acting Director, Innovation and Youth Engagement Division at Environment and Climate Change Canada, here to share some of the things they're working on, developments, aspirations, challenges. Ma'am.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really happy to be here to share some of what we've been doing at Environment and Climate Change Canada. So my team is the Innovation and Youth Engagement Division, and we're responsible for advancing beyond 2020. So that's the Agile, Inclusive and Equipped Workforce as the framework within which other many initiatives take place in our department. We also advance innovation capacity building and experimentation capacity building as well, which are closely interlinked with this conversation today, which is about the future of work. It's about where do we want to see the future of the public service. In my team, we also are responsible for youth engagement, which is a fascinating area as well. So just to give a bit of background around why I'm speaking about this topic today, so at Environment and Climate Change Canada, last year in July 2020, our Executive Management Committee had a discussion around the new normal. So the opportunity there was to really have senior management reflect on, you know, what had changed, what were they seeing in terms of what was working well, and what that might mean for the future. And so coming out of that experience and that sort of discussion around leadership and what works and what doesn't, there was interest in engaging employees and having a bit broader discussion on the topic. So our team was asked to lead some consultations and engagement with employees and groups in the department around what the future of work could look like. And by that, I mean, you know, 2, 5, 10 years out, but obviously grounded in, you know, the experience that we've had during COVID, because we've had so many shifts. So what have we learned from that experience? What's been going well for different groups of employees, and what might we want to carry through to the future? So going beyond, you know, return to the workplace and business continuity, but really trying to look ahead. Alors, notre équipe a travaillé pour recueillir les idées des employés et des gestionnaires sur leurs expériences et leurs points de vue sur l'avenir. Nous avons fait une analyse de l'environnement, examiné les tendances mondiales et celles du gouvernement fédéral. Nous avons examiné les scénarios et nous sommes en train de proposer une vision et partager ce qu'on a entendu avec des différents comités de gestion. So what I'd like to do now is just share with you what we've heard and some of the themes that were really important in these discussions. Certainly there will probably be many parallels to the discussions in other government departments and other sectors as well. But at the same time, it's important to recognize that there are some unique elements, of course. At ECCC, as a science-based department, we have many employees who are not just office workers in the sense that is very transferable to any location. We have people who work in the field, we have lab workers, we have special operations such as enforcement and meteorologists who do have very specific tasks that can only be done in certain places. And so when we were doing this work, I guess a couple of things that we were trying to keep in mind as context for discussions on the future of work are perhaps two things. One, very important to government as a whole, is diversity and inclusion. So as we're thinking about what the future looks like, how can we make choices that will contribute to and advance diversity and inclusion? So that was an important consideration as we engaged in those conversations. And another one, of course, is because of our mandate, we're focused on reducing the impacts of climate change, focused on net zero for the future, and advancing related environmental objectives. And so another consideration as we look to the future is how will decisions positively impact our ability as a department to be a leader in those spaces. And of course, all of that is overlaid by considerations around delivery and operational requirements. So I'll go through some of the findings. So one of the themes that we talked about was management and productivity. Alors, cette catégorie a eu beaucoup de commentaires et beaucoup de suggestions. Et ce qu'on a entendu, c'est que la gestion dans un environnement plus virtuel exige une approche différente. Cela nécessite une plus grande confiance, une communication plus claire, moins de hiérarchie et une plus grande autonomie pour les employés. Les gestionnaires du futur auront besoin et devront être formés à des différentes compétences et aptitudes. La mesure de la productivité dans un environnement de travail virtuel et hybride est différente. Cela peut inclure contrôler les livrables plutôt que les heures. We've also heard about the performance management process and how that could be enhanced to be more supportive of engagement, culture, motivation, and learning and development. So there's certainly a link, as Donald pointed out, between learning and skills and how managers might need to behave in the future. A key point was obviously around flexibility. And so when we talk about both the manager's perspective, but also the perspective shared by many employees, was around talent hiring and retention and how important flexibility is currently, but the view is that it will be increasingly important in the future. And ECCC certainly wants to remain an employer of choice. And so there's an interest there in considering, by many, in considering what that means for hiring processes. And we've heard from many managers that, one of the first things that candidates ask is what flexibility will they have to work from home or to work from different parts of the country. And so managers are having to think about those things now, but it does present an opportunity to have some longer term decisions in that space as well. We also talked about productivity from the perspective of how has the current COVID context impacted productivity. And we've also gathered data through pulse check surveys, of course, and there have been different perspectives. Some feel much more productive, some feel less productive. But when we talk about productivity, we have to remember that some jobs haven't been able to operate as normal during COVID, and in a post-pandemic situation, even if we have remote work, we may be able to address that in a different way. And then related to that is the question of work-life balance. So we've certainly heard that with the emphasis on working at home for many employees and the technology of kind of always being on, there has been some concerns around the perceptions of how available we have to be right now. So as we think to the future, that's another important consideration around how do we better define expectations related to how we divide our personal time, how we allow people to have breaks, and so that expectations that may shift more towards deliverables than time-based markers at the same time. We need to be careful that we don't translate those expectations into the sense of people needing to work longer hours. And then another really important point of view from management was around culture. And so through COVID, we certainly were able to identify many examples where, culture of creativity, of collaboration, of problem solving led to the ability to adapt quickly and continue to deliver under difficult circumstances. And there are many other aspects of culture that are important too. And so there have been a lot of discussions around, in the future, if hybrid continues to be important or we continue to have an increase in virtual work, how do we make sure that we're maintaining the culture that we want? And so there's different perspectives there. And one thing that I find interesting is when we talk to employees who've been onboarded during COVID, during the last year, overall the data is suggesting that they feel very well included, that they're quite happy with their experiences and do feel connected with the teams. And in ECCC, as in many other departments, we've had dispersed teams before where people were located across the country and their manager or director or DG is in another place, and we've been able to manage that. So the question is, given that culture is so important, what can we learn from that, and how can we make sure, what are the best practices to continue to support, that creative, innovative, inclusive culture? I spoke a little bit about mental health and safety, so I'll just pick up on that a little bit more right now. Les tendances en matière de santé mentale et la capacité à faire face à la situation pourraient être le résultat d'un conflit entre la vie familiale et les responsabilités professionnelles, de la différence entre les impacts à court et à long terme de la pandémie ou d'autres choses. L'isolement est en hausse. Le fait de travailler à distance a des répercussions personnelles négatives en raison des réseaux de soutien limités disponibles. Il est beaucoup plus difficile pour les employés de se sentir inclus et connectés avec leurs équipes dans un environnement virtuel. La communication doit être un effort beaucoup plus délibéré sur le lieu de travail éloigné. So one of the points that come out of that is that on the one hand, employees have voiced how in some ways it's been harder to network and kind of connect with others outside of their teams. But on the other hand, because of our virtual platform being sort of the same for everyone, we've also heard from employees, often in regional offices, that this has actually also created a bit of an equity and that it's easier to be included in various conversations that before might have been harder when discussions happened in boardrooms. So we can think about how do we make sure, whatever the future looks like, that we do offer those opportunities for everyone to be heard and everyone to be included, no matter where they're located. So location and space is obviously something important to think about. And we didn't actually have a lot of conversations about what does the workplace look like. It was really interesting. It is essentially, it's almost as if there is an assumption that the future will be hybrid. And so when you're talking about what the workplace and the office space looks like, that wasn't actually a huge concern. The interest is more around what is the flexibility to work from different locations sometimes, or to have more ownership over what your schedule looks like. Another aspect of diversity and inclusion that I think is important, so I mentioned a little bit about regional inclusion. And then one of the points that was raised quite often in our discussions is that if we're able to have less of a formal tie between the location where you live and the location where your job is, it may open up more opportunities for learning and development for employees who otherwise wouldn't have been able to take advantage of those. And specifically, it allows us to tap into talent no matter where that is, specifically for rural and remote and Indigenous employees as well. So I think I'll wrap up there. I've just tried to give a really quick overview of some of the findings and some of the points that have been raised in our conversations. But overall, if there were some key messages about what we've heard that people are looking for, it's looking for more flexibility, looking for a hybrid environment of some type, build on the experience of what's worked with dispersed teams that existed pre-COVID and what worked well during COVID. That we have real opportunities to advance talent development and inclusive recruitment, and that we do also need to pay attention to culture and the development of new skills and behaviors, both for management but also for employees. So thank you so much. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Holly. The more we speak about the future of work, the more I realize that some of us have been marinating on the topic for quite some time. Some of us are really deep into concrete development of actionable plans, which is awesome. And some of us may still be only very lightly familiar with the topic, and this may be your first time. So I'm going to launch a poll in Slido just to check where our audience is at right now. But now, more importantly, the one, the only, oh yeah, he knows, he knows, Mr. Jason Lawson, Directeur Expérimentation et Partenariat au Bureau de la Dirigeante Principale des Ressources Humaines. Sir.
I knew you were going to give me a silly introduction. I should have expected it. So thanks everybody for having me here today, and thank you, Jasmine, for that lovely introduction. So my name is Jason Lawson. I'm director, as Jasmine said, for experimentation and partnerships at OCRO. And I think today what I'm hoping to talk about quickly is my team's role and some of our goals. Why we're doing this work within a central agency and why that's important, kind of why can OCRO do things that only OCRO can do. I'll share an example of the kind of things we're working on, which some of you may be familiar with, such as our self-identification modernization project. Also, I think I want to touch on some of our plans to work more closely with HR innovators across the public service, such as the forum of people that are here today, and share a preview of our considerations and really introduce some of the ways we'd like to work together. So I'm really happy to be here and happy to have the opportunity to speak. So what are we doing? So first, to clarify what our team does, we work within OCRO, which is the Office of the Chief Human Resource Officer at TBS, to support a future-ready public service and to shape a more inclusive and sustainable people management agenda for the government of Canada. And we do this through strategic planning and policy advice, through research, through human-centered design, experimentation, and engagement. Our teams are multidisciplinary by design. So we've brought together diverse experts such as policy analysts, behavioral insights experts, human-centered designers, system thinkers, and human resource experts, kind of bringing them all together in one team. Notre approche implique, on veut vraiment beaucoup de collaboration, de l'expérimentation, l'itération, et vraiment établir des liens de confiance avec nos partenaires. On veut vraiment axer notre travail sur les personnes en premier lieu, les humains en premier lieu, à travers c'est ça, de la conceptualisation basée sur l'humain et l'introspection comportementale pour vraiment susciter des changements qui vont durer. We also leverage important work being done outside of OCRO in the future of work and HR spaces, and wish to kind of convene, support, and champion other groups that share our vision and values. I think ESDC is a great example of that. So why doing this work at OCRO is kind of unique and important. Because OCRO's role in supporting people management frameworks across the public service, we're undertaking work to better understand how public servants can thrive in various contexts. There's not a lot of evidence out there using behavioral science to fix internal processes. So it's been used externally quite a bit, but not a ton on kind of the inwards facing organizations. There's a lot of research happening on citizen-facing challenges, but organizational design, or not a ton on organizational decision-making. So the message around the management table at OCRO is that experimentation and innovation are not only accepted, but expected. And I think that's because of the understanding of the importance of good data and a solid evidence base. So for us, that's really uplifting and it's exciting. So an example of the kind of the work we do. For example, during the pandemic, OCRO released a lot of guidance to support the many shifts in how public servants worked. And we're also giving a lot of thought to the kinds of challenges and change public servants might face over the coming years as we transition to post-pandemic work. This affects so many facets, as my colleagues have mentioned before us, of how and where we work. We've heard hybrid already a number of times today. And we're looking at these under the context of longer term shifts and the future of work. For example, we're currently looking into supporting data collection and policy development processes to enable a consistent government-wide approach on remote work. We're also collaborating with some of our colleagues in priorities and planning here at TBS to test best practices in managing distributed teams with hundreds of public servants who are working at central agencies. So the first intervention we're testing on that front is whether the implementation of team charters, so things that outline common expectations for an entire unit or team, can contribute to improving work-life balance and work expectations between management and employees. And later on, we'll use pulse surveys and test task-based time blocking as well. We're also reducing the amount of time it takes to hire public servants, as that's obviously, I think, to everybody something that is and should be a priority. So we're leading a randomized controlled trial to identify whether and how centralized staffing pools can support these goals. Other aspects of work we're looking at applied and academic work in behavioral science and testing these concepts in a government context to help identify the highest impact interventions that can result in really great outcomes. And from a behavioral science and human-centered design perspective, there's really a lot we can do to make HR and government better. So the public service, as we know, is a massive organization and it's full of complicated issues. So there are so many interesting, complex, what we call wicked problems to solve that are under this people management umbrella. And I think bringing these new methods and techniques to the table can help us try and tackle or maybe unwind some of these big knots that exist. So if we get it right, I think there's really a potential to change government in ways that makes things easier across the system. And I think that's what the future of work is all about. We could change who we hire, how we hire, the talent we recruit, not to mention value propositions such as cost savings as well, and regional representation. So really, there's a lot of ways to do this and to do it well. One of the big projects that we've spent, that kind of launched our team and we spent a lot of time on so far is the Self-ID modernization project. So really that's looking to increase the representation of women, Black and racialized Canadians, persons with disabilities, Indigenous peoples, and the LGBTQ Canadians in the public service. And this is really a huge priority for government. And it's core to our president's mandate. So we started a system-wide self-identification modernization project to really build the evidence base to help support the accuracy, the breadth, and the reliability of employment equity data. I think it speaks to the leadership in our organization that we were given a runway to do evidence and research well and to actually co-design this whole process with stakeholders. And I think that speaks to the evolution that we're seeing in the public service and the culture of the public service as well. It's the first time, certainly, I've used human-centered design in collaboration with behavioral insights and really using these methodologies in the right way so that they're complementary. And to me, maybe I'm nerding out a little bit here, but to me, that's really, really exciting, bringing these things together. We dove really deeply into the research on the qualitative and the quantitative front, and we undertook a design micro mission. So where we brought in public servants from all across the country in different departments to really help us explore the problems in greater depth and to really co-design solutions and prototypes to solutions together. So this is going to result in a number of things. Among them, and importantly, is a new draft self-identification questionnaire, on which we actually already also ran an experiment with a sample of public servants, and we're continuing to refine that through consultations. So really, we're looking forward to being able to share the key findings and the lessons learned from self-ID modernization and to really inform system-level recommendations to help implement related policy and operational solutions. So stay tuned for that as it comes to a diversity inclusion shop near you. So now more about how we want to work with other HR innovators across the GC. So really, we're a new team that's still getting established within OCRO, and we want to collaborate on meaningful experimentation with colleagues across the public service. As I mentioned, we really appreciate the leadership ESDC is already showing with initiatives such as HR à la carte, and acknowledge that other departments such as CRA, who is here, and communities are also doing great work. So we want OCRO to also do its part for the HR experimentation community. Our plan is to start with some informal conversations, so connecting with future of work researchers, doing sessions where we can show the things that we're doing, either us or others, such as similar to this, to share the work in progress and to invite feedback. And we want to build on ESDC's foresight work and piloting informal scanning club here at OCRO. So I know we're a little short on time, so what I'll do is if there are things that you would like to see OCRO convene as well, I invite you to put them in the chat. We are paying attention and we'd love to hear from you on that front. Because we do want to understand what kind of experiments would help the system. We have ideas, we've got different ways of soliciting those ideas, but we don't pretend to be the only source of them, and we'd be really happy to hear about them. So once we get those ideas, we'd really like to test and scale the good ones across, and our plan to do so is kind of articulated through 10 principles that identify really where we should focus our efforts. And I think these speak to a way of working that's really intertwined in the future of work, because we're principles based. So I'll say them out loud and I can share them in the chat after, and feel free to comment or to provide anything that you think is relevant. But we're looking for relevance and alignment. First and foremost, so relevant to OCRO's role, to government priorities, and to Canada's digital standards. We're also looking to find a unique need, new projects or ones that build on work that's already underway across the government. Partner support. It's important that there's support from the players in the system and the work that we're entertaining. Feasibility. The project has to have a clear problem statement, and both our team and our partners are in a position to scope and actually undertake the work. Openness. We can share the project design, the result, and the lessons with colleagues across the GC and beyond, because doing it in isolation or in secret doesn't really serve anybody. So we really want to walk the talk on openness by default. We want to make sure that there are measurable benefits, that the project offers tangible benefits for the whole ecosystem, either immediately or incrementally. Efficiency gains. We want to make governance processes better. Sustainability, that it can have a lasting impact and the system's resource to manage it. And scalability, I think, is really important as well, as the methodology or overall initiative can be used, reused, and expanded in some sort of way. And then finally, ethics and privacy. We want to make sure that we're working in the good way, in the right way, and that we add to GC's, the Government of Canada's knowledge on research and ethics. So I'll share those with you, and I think I will end on saying, yeah, this is a bit of an introduction, and that we'd love to collaborate with you, to share ideas, experiences, to work openly, and that we're looking really to help scale and support the HR innovation community in the Government of Canada. So thanks for your time.
Oh, awesome to hear. I heard him say, we're going to change government. Let's print some t-shirts. Let's get it happening. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. On va maintenant sauter directement à la période des questions. Je sais qu'on a quelques représentants de divers ministères qui travaillent aussi sur l'avenir du travail. Donc, si jamais vous voulez manifester, panelists, I will ask that you turn your cameras back on, because we are now at the question period, the juicy part of the session. So here we are. Good grief, the chat is on fire. Okay, so just a clarification. So when we talk about the future of work, and according to the poll that was just launched in Slido, this is not the first time people are hearing about it, which is great, but it can mean different things for different partners because they have different organizations, different point of views, and they serve different audiences. And so what do you mean when you say the future of work? Are we talking about, Marie-Ève addressed this before, are we talking about 2 years? Are we talking about 5? Are we talking about 30?
If I can go first, I jumped in front of Jason. I mean,
You did.
It's all good. It's all good. Take it away.
I think it could be all of the above, actually, because sometimes when you're stuck in what you're doing, the 2-year future seems so far away that you might start with 2 years. If you are redefining or redesigning what something might look like in 15, I would encourage you to do that. But I think that and that's something that we learn using the framework, is that it is good to push your thinking process a little further, but sometimes 2 years has to be good enough.
Just so we're being polite, Mr. Lawson, because you raised your hand.
Thank you. For me, like putting a time box on the future of work is a bit difficult because by the very nature of it, the future of work is always in the future, right? So like it's a moving target, right? So we can't say this is what we want in 5 years. What I think is to me, it's more of like a mindset of how you're thinking about things. It's like a strategic frame in the sense that you're not thinking about necessarily the problems of today, but you're framing the problems of today with potential realities in the future. And I think that's what it's more about. It's not necessarily this time-bound concept, but it's really looking towards how things might change and then how we can react to them and how we will be prepared for them.
I'm ready to go with another question. If Mr. Mulligan or Madam Palin does not have anything to say, go.
Just only to agree with Jason, absolutely. I think this idea, it's a really useful way of thinking about lots of operational challenges, but certainly for the countries that we're speaking with, they kind of begin with the operational challenges. We work with countries and they say, look, well, border guards in some countries are employed by the state and they're going to go out of business at some point. So what can we do now? And that's kind of how they arrive at their eventual time frame, but it starts with this problem statement.
Merci. On parle beaucoup de changement de culture en tant qu'élément absolument nécessaire à la transformation qui va concrétiser l'avenir du travail, which is a constantly moving target, really nicely noted. Qu'est-ce que ça veut dire pour vous? Puis comment est-ce qu'on procède pour mesurer le changement de culture? Seems impossible to me, but...
Je peux m'essayer, si vous voulez, ou Donald, tu peux y aller. Donc, je pense, la question de comment définir la culture, c'est peut-être où on doit commencer, parce qu'il y a beaucoup, il y a une culture organisationnelle, puis il y a plusieurs paliers dans la culture organisationnelle aussi, où jusqu'à l'individu. Puis, surtout en ressources humaines, les politiques, les directives, les procédures, tout ça, ça vient créer une culture. Donc, il y a quand même une certaine façon d'influencer la culture à travers les outils qu'on a. Puis il y en a aussi que c'est moins tangible. L'approche au leadership, les gens qu'on engage, les leaders qu'on engage, la diversité, l'inclusion, pas seulement peut-être dans le sens traditionnel, mais aussi diversité d'inclusion de pensée, la diversité d'inclusion cognitive. Puis tous ces éléments-là viennent influencer la culture un peu. Puis je pense que c'est ça que moi j'entends de comment qu'on peut changer la culture. De là à la mesurer, on a des outils en place. Est-ce qu'ils sont parfaits? Je ne sais pas. L'acronyme en français m'échappe, mais le PSIS, c'en est un qui est capable de mesurer ça. Puis il y a des outils semblables à ça qui peuvent nous aider à le mesurer. Mais je pense qu'on peut aller plus loin que ça pour nous aider à mesurer l'impact, mais au moins c'est un début. C'est pas comme si on n'a pas d'outils pour le faire.
Parfait. Merci, Mr. Lawson. Mr. Mulligan?
Tout à fait, c'est une question difficile, enfin, mais je me suis posé la question, qu'est-ce qu'on comprend par culture? Ma culture, la vôtre, la culture de mon manager, à travers la fonction publique, c'est hyper complexe. Donc, ouais, je serais tenté de dire un peu comme Jason, mais oui, ça, la culture, c'est quelque chose qui d'un côté, ça se définit pas, ça se sent, mais de l'autre côté, ça peut se définir. Si on parle d'une culture de haute performance, d'une équipe qui arrive à tirer les talents, effectivement, oui, on pourrait prendre des mesures comme le volume de candidats, mais oui, la question est j'ai pas de réponse, mais c'est juste qu'il y a plusieurs éléments qui entrent en jeu.
Mm-hmm. Puis mesurer le changement en général aussi, parce qu'on se dit, OK, l'avenir du travail, c'est ça, c'est ça, c'est ça. Est-ce qu'on établit un plan d'action avec une vision de 10 ans pour se dire, OK, whoever's in power in 10 years, please check back on these objectives and report in? Mm-hmm. How do we even do that? Do we even do that? Can we even do that? Next question. Okay, donc, where, according to you, this can be your personal perspectives as well, where should we most invest our efforts right now as public sectors in order to more adequately prepare for the future? What's our biggest area of improvement? And I'm not talking quick wins. I'm talking like transformation, like I would wear it on a t-shirt.
Maybe I can jump in. So just building on the last question, I think there are many, I think Jason said this, there are many layers to culture and there are many different elements. And sometimes those elements can be in conflict with each other. So part of it is about defining what's most important. And there is variability between teams and missions. And, you know, so different parts of the organization will have different cultures, but having that overall sort of guiding framework is really important. And so, like, I come back to a few frameworks that we have that are important. And then that leads a bit to where to invest. So like when you think about the Beyond 2020 framework of agile, inclusive, and equipped, that has remained relevant under COVID and I think will continue to be so. Those are core kind of pieces that we want to build the public service of the future upon. And obviously those are very can be interpreted in different ways, but that's sort of the point, is that you have guiding principles and then you can adapt them to what makes sense for your organization. And in terms of where to invest, I think there's a couple things that are really important to think about. One is in the sense of having a high performance and evidence-based public service. You know, Jason talked about experimentation. I think that's an area where there is still a need for capacity building in terms of not only the mindset and behavior and the willingness to embrace change, to try new ways of doing things, and to put the resources into developing and testing different approaches, I think is really, really important. And so there's an element of kind of not only investment in training and mindsets and awareness, but also in the funding required to actually implement those kinds of things, to get the results, to find out how we're improving and how we're continuing to advance overall in terms of effectiveness and high performance. And then the other piece that's been really important during COVID, and I expect will continue to be so, is around mental health and how, you know, how we as an employer support employee mental health, support managers in supporting their employees. And I think we've seen a lot of really good work this year on that, and I think that'll continue to be an important area of emphasis. Thanks.
I have a few hard questions. So if we're talking about experimentation, and we're talking about learning through iteration, we're starting small because, you know, the gigantic mistakes, we don't want them to turn into fiascos. But we're a large federal public service. We span across a big geographic area, across communities, across functional communities. So I can't even imagine how the OECD does it across countries to pull kind of the lessons learned so we can learn from each other. that dialogue to me is not happening enough. So how does that OECD do it? I'm not saying you have the answer, but how do you take the best from participating countries, transfer those lessons learned to those who are willing to hear it and accept it and implement and collaborate? Like what's the secret? What's the secret, Mr. Mulligan?
I'll whisper the secret. No, it's a good question, and it really builds on what we've heard here today. It's exactly how do you speak with people that are interested in this problem? I mean, we're an international organization. For a lot of the projects that we work on, we take a plane, we travel to a country, we discuss innovation, learning, HR, whatever it might be. It's in nobody's interest that we force a particular framework or model down someone's throat. It really has to come from them. And when we at the OECD are able to connect people doing this in individual countries with each other, I mean, that's a really productive and fascinating conversation. The other side as well is I guess one of the ways I look at it is two sides. On the one hand, we have data, so we're able to compare data across countries. Yes, we have problems sometimes trying to establish, well, what's the difference between the way the Swedish public service and the Canadian public service are set up? Are they comparable? But that's one area where we try and build at least a consensus for how countries are doing without trying to put a stamp on, first place, second place, third place. And the other side as well, and I think Jason mentioned it, Naive and Holly too, is this idea of principles. I think that was one common word that came across in your presentations. What are the principles that we're trying to act by, and then how can we use those principles to shape action, rather than directives, reports, document dumps and information dumps. It's this idea of principle and trying to engage around that. I'm not sure if I answered your question or dodged it, but happy to continue.
Thank you. Is there anyone else wanting to chime in on that?
I might chime in, and it's not so much on what the OECD does, obviously, but more on maybe what we're hoping to do within government here, and what I was speaking to a little bit before, and it's how to create it like a forum, you said, to have more of these discussions, Jasmine. And I think what we're hoping to do, and the way to draw people in, is to create really an exchange of value. Obviously, there's something that we, as a central agency, we want to get out of this conversation, and we have an agenda, I think, for good. But in order to really draw people in and to get legitimate, sustainable engagement, people have to get something in return, and that's beyond just information, right? So it has to be something tangible, something they can really sink their teeth in and use. So it has to be, it can't be about us, it can't be about them, it has to really, as cheesy as it sounds, be about us, right? And so that everybody's gaining in those. And I think that's when you create forums and spaces where we can see true innovation, true exchange, and sustainable value building that serves the enterprise.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing. What do you feel are the critical strategic decisions that leaders across public sectors should be making regarding the 10-year horizon? Je vais le dire en français pour vous laisser un peu de temps pour réfléchir. Quelles sont les décisions stratégiques cruciales, essentielles, que les dirigeants des secteurs publics devraient prendre selon vous dans un horizon de 10 ans? What should we do now to have an impact, which is, to me, a shorter term, 10-year? Because it is the federal public service. We do kind of move slow because we're big and other things.
Maybe I can jump in just to start answering the question. Not that I'm going to say what I think the decisions should be, but more the areas that I think are really critical. I think I've touched on before, but the first one is the talent, is development, is recruitment. And so determining what maybe the principles for those are, but we need to really think about what are the ways that we're recruiting to support diversity and inclusion, support regional inclusion, and enable an equity in terms of opportunities for development, I think is really important. So maybe I'll just leave it at that, but that's, I think, the top one, I would say.
Cool, thank you. Anyone else want to jump? One?
Yeah, I think the main decision will be the investment investment of time, investment of resources, investment in the people as well. So in looking at future of work, when you make decisions, you have to start small. You have to start with the curiosity of what could it look like in 10 years and start from there. And don't be discouraged and try it out, do some experiments as well. So I think that by trials and errors and keep going really with the decisions and where you think that the organization should go or should be in 10 years, I think that investment in people and in resources will pay off at the end of the day.
And I think to piggyback off of that, I think investment is the key word there. And when you make an investment, you don't always, or you shouldn't expect an immediate return. Investments take time to grow, and we have to be patient and know that, with the experimentation with innovation, there's going to be some ups and downs, but the trend is up in the long term, and that's what the investment is about. And we just have to be patient and have to understand that the time, the money, the resources that we're putting into this will pay off in the long term, and to not get distracted or diverted by maybe some short-term setbacks and challenges.
I saw you unmute there for a second. Yep.
I either unmuted or almost left the chat. No, I think with a 10-year time frame, I mean, one of the things that we've seen, we conducted a survey around this time last year on how administrations were coping with COVID and so on, and we tried to tease out some principles for how people might look at the future. And one of the things that came back from our conversations was this idea that the public sector right now is in the spotlight as never before. There's a real recognition. I mean, it's for good and bad, right? But there's a recognition that the public sector has a real role to play. And if we think of the type of skills that we've been speaking about today, the public sector as a career choice has so many options for that, yet the image it suffers from is just terrible in most countries. I'm exaggerating to prove a point, but the public sector leaders now looking to a 10-year horizon have an opportunity to capitalize on that, on this goodwill, on this sense that, well, we know a little bit more what the public sector does now. And you're seeing it in pockets. We work with the French administration here, and they're getting better at really explaining the different types of jobs. They had a series on unloved jobs in the public sector where they take an agent and they talk about what their role might involve and how this person has moved left and right and so on. And it's this type of capitalizing in the moment, I guess, that will kind of tease out some of the areas I think that we've spoken about.
Nice. Going to look at hiring leaders who have marketing abilities. Wonderful. What are some of the common misconceptions about the future of work and what it is not?
I think I'll start with a story about my director general. She always says that one thing that she cringes when she hears is the future is now, and she hates it because she always says, well, technically the future cannot really be now, it's always in the future. So not really my story to share, but I said it. So I think that's one of the misconceptions, is that you think that you're going to get to an end, and that's something that Jason and Donald actually talked about earlier, is that there's no end in sight. It keeps getting further and further, because that's what the future is all about. So you never get to a point where it's final. I've done future of work. That's done now. So I think that's for me, or for us, it's one of the biggest misconception, is that the future is now. We need to act now for something that is now, where future of work in our perspective is always further away.
Noted. It's not now. Thank you.
Wow.
Anything else it is not?
Well, it's certainly not easy to talk about succinctly. I mean, there's just so many avenues that it could go down. No, I mean, we've been doing a bit of thinking on this, working with Peter Capelli at the Wharton School, and we've been talking about this idea that the robots are coming from our jobs, and it tends to be how a lot of people engage with it, at least initially when you come into it. The evidence base for that is just not there. I mean, I guess getting down to that degree of nuance, like specific tasks and specific functions will alter in ways that we find it quite hard to frame. So I guess, I mean, that's one of the classics.
Yeah. That's a good one. Thank you. An employment equity question. Are your organizations applying a reconciliation lens to the future of work? And then if yes, what does that look like? So specifically for Indigenous communities in the future of work, the deliberate effort for inclusion, and how are we doing that when we are planning or not planning the future of work? I know this is too easy. I know.
I think I can speak to what Okro is doing, and one of the pillars in the vision for future of work is diversity and inclusion, and that includes reconciliation. So it's embedded in the very foundation of what we're doing in terms of our thinking and our framework. So I guess it's not a very comprehensive answer other than saying yes. It is part of the frame and what we're thinking about, and it's included.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Lawson. From the departments? Not you, nor you, international entity.
Diversity and inclusion is also included in our framework. We talk about it. I cannot tell you that we concentrate on one employment equity group over another, but we do talk about diversity and inclusion in our framework. It is definitely important. We talk about it in our agency workforce plan as well. So this is definitely something that is here to stay. And I think that the government in general and the agency will be stronger and better with a more diverse and inclusive workforce. So to me, it's almost a no-brainer that is there. And I think that as long as we can, well, we consult with a few networks within the agency, and we make sure that the networks on employment equity, diversity, and inclusion are included in our consultation as well.
I think that's something I saw go by on Slido, and also that was there when we were conducting future work research was, well, there might be a bigger divide now because we're so reliant on Wi-Fi and internet access that rural communities and so Indigenous, but other communities who live in remote areas might be disadvantaged by this whole situation, on top of, not having access to healthcare, clean water, et cetera. But from a professional standpoint, the Wi-Fi, crazy how reliant we have become. And so now it becomes like an essential part of almost hiring, right? Who we're going to hire in the future. And so it's not just HR, it's interjurisdictional, and it goes across different functions like infrastructure. We cannot, well, maybe we can send you a little device with a little Wi-Fi booster with your letter of offer, but something maybe that we need to consider in the future of work. Oh, you guys are full of information in the chat. Thank you so much. I feel like you should be hosting this. Given the strong desire of employees to maintain a flexible work environment, how is the employer engaging with the unions to build consistent flexibilities into the CBAs? What's a CBA? I'm a seasoned public servant. I'm sorry, I don't know this one. Into the conditions, but employment? No, not even. What are we doing about building the, how are we reconciling the desire for employees to kind of continue to work in our, en français on dit du linge mou, how can we lessen our commute? How can we continue to thrive in our virtual work environments? Stay close to our children. For some of us, it's been like just, thank you. Collective bargaining agreements. Oh, former Okro should know this. Thank you so much. So are we building this into our future of work perspective?
Maybe I can jump in just really quickly. maybe not so much on the union question, although we've had some engagement as part of our engagement with bargaining agents, of course, and they raised really interesting points around the frameworks that surround employment and where there might need to be attention paid to that, and also implications for union membership depending on where people live and things like that. So it's certainly a really important consideration. Oh, now I've forgotten what I was going to say. I'll just stop.
Trust the universe, it will come back. Thank you all for the clarification. So just to continue on that topic of collective agreement and how we negotiate a work contract in the future or as of right now, as virtual work opens doors to rural and potential EE groups, employment equity groups, example, those with mobility issues, is there any move to standardize which roles and classifications can remain virtual? Sort of the way minimum education is standardized. Are we shifting paradigms here?
I think we have to a little bit. Mind blown. I think that, well, for the agency anyways, we're close to 50,000 people now working at the agency. So it's a lot of people. And really when it comes to, we have people from coast to coast. So we have already started the workplace of the future, and we have started discussions. With the union, so they're not completely in the dark, but there's so many elements that come into play, because a letter of offer is attached to a geocode, so a geographical code, and like when you work from home, then that becomes your workplace, therefore it has taxes impacts. Like it, as soon as you just scratch the little surface, you get like a million questions. So definitely it's on top of mind, but it's going to take time for the government of Canada to actually go around, and I think that we're going to have to rely on each other to not redo the same mistake or not redo the same work and build on what the others are doing, especially for the flexibility with the workplace of the future.
Merci. On a plus de temps, mais M. Lawson il a démuté, alors j'imagine qu'il y a quelque chose à dire.
Je voulais juste ajouter, oui, que la question qui tue, que tu viens de nous poser à la fin, là, Jasmine, mais, mais je pense que vraiment, quand on parle de classification, c'est un problème immensement complexe. Puis il y a beaucoup de facettes qui viennent jouer là-dedans, y compris des syndicats. Puis c'est quelque chose à quoi qu'on s'attarde. Ça fait longtemps que c'est un défi auquel on essaie d'examiner puis essaie de trouver des solutions. Puis je pense que c'est un des défis qu'on va peut-être devoir prendre une petite bouchée à la fois, et ça ne sera pas un changement immense soudain, mais plutôt quelque chose que ça va être une évolution, une progression vers pour ajouter des éléments ou enlever des éléments. Ajouter des éléments qui fonctionnent, puis peut-être en enlever qui fonctionnent un peu moins bien pour arriver à une solution progressive.
C'est vrai, on n'a pas juste un syndicat, on en a plusieurs, une petite bouchée à la fois. I think that for everyone's mental health would be a good way to proceed. So thank you all so very much. Merci à tous et à toutes pour votre participation aujourd'hui. Panelists, you've been fabulous. Audience, you've been awesome. Thank you all for your participation. Keep an eye out for our next event, probably end of June, on our GC Collab page, our wiki page for the recordings, the transcripts, additional resources, more information on future events, but also on today's event. So see you again soon. Be safe, be healthy, everyone. Merci à tout le monde. Ciao.